Hello, welcome to Civics, y'all, on the Texas legislative session, the 102. It's going to be really good, in-depth information that you'll be getting on this Civics, y'all. My name is Ray Martinez, and I'm the Texas Rising Director for TFN, and my pronouns are they, them. Texas Rising is made up of young folks across Texas working together to push for change and progressive change. So we're going to be doing a lot of work around the Texas legislative session. There will be more civic skills that you can hop onto to get information about what's happening and how you can plug in. There is a 101 that we did last week. Carissa gave us that 101 last week. It was very helpful. It's a good introductory primer for you to look at. All right, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Carissa Lopez, who is the political director for the Texas Freedom Network. Knows a ton about the Texas state legislature, has been doing a lot of work at the Texas Lege over many years. So she's our resident expert. And together you all are going to become experts with her, or you will also become experts after this call. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Carissa Lopez.
Hey y'all, thanks for having me again for our Lege 102 training. Like Grace said, I'm Carissa Lopez. I'm the political director here at the Texas Freedom Network. I'm a Texas Rising grad from about a decade ago, but I'm excited to be here to dig into the legislative process. Last week we did a 101, so now we're here to do the 102, which is going to really kind of get pretty procedural. We'll learn how to read a bill. We'll learn, what the different calendars committees mean, define some more terms. So really dig in. What we're not going to do today is dig into the issues. We have plenty of time. We have lots of time to reserved to dig into that in student chapter meetings and in future civics, y'all. Today's mostly about procedure. So like Ray said, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. If I can get to them as we go, I will. If not, we will reserve time at the end to get to those questions. We have a lot to get through, and it is going to be, some pieces might be a little dense, so thanks for being here and wanting to, like I think I said last time, we're going to nerd out a little bit. So if you do have questions, like I said, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm sure somebody else will have the same question because we are going to get a little, digging kind of deep today. So just a reminder, this is the current makeup of each chamber. The chambers, we say each chamber, the House of Representatives is a chamber, the Senate is a chamber. So that's what we say when we mean chambers. So there's 31 senators, 13 Democrats, 18 Republicans. One of those Democrats in the Senate often votes with the Republicans. Many of you know who he is. 150 representatives in the House of Representatives, 67 Democrats, 83 Republicans. Dan Patrick is the lieutenant governor and also the president of the Senate. He presides over the Senate. And then you have the Speaker of the House. This is Dade Phelan. He presides over the House of Representatives. So just a little refresher from last time. So this, if you were with us last time, you remember we went through a very simple version of how to pass a bill. But there's a lot of minutia in the process as well. I am not going to read this off for you, but you are welcome to take a screenshot. I see somebody asking about slides. Yes, we can totally send out slides afterwards as well. But gives you context for just how complicated this can get, right? So like I said, we're going to dig into some of the big pieces that you might hear. Some of this, a lot of us have been doing this. We'll still talk to lawyers to kind of get clarification on the process because it's so nitty gritty. But this is the complicated version. So I'm going to start us off though with how to read a bill, right? You look at it, you pull a bill up. Like, what does this mean? What are all these strike throughs and underlines? What does all of that mean? Let's talk about it. So first, what is a bill? A bill is a legislative document used to create or amend laws. And I want to thank my friend Drusilla Tigner at the ACLU because I borrowed some of these slides from her on a previous training we did. So if you like them, you can thank her. If you don't like them, I didn't make all of them. Legislative documents used to create or amend laws, that's a bill. A bill can actually, per the Texas Constitution, only contain one subject within the bill. If it contains more than one subject, it's unconstitutional, per Section 35, Article 3 of the Texas Constitution. Just if you wanted to go look it up. Best understood in context. So if you're looking at a bill, what statute or part of the Constitution is the bill going to change? So we'll look at a couple of examples from last legislative session. So this is Senate Bill 22 from the 2019 legislative session. You can see here that we're looking at, it says at the very top, Section 1, Subtitle F, Title 10 of the Government Code is amended by adding the following. So what does that mean? Well, we have to go look and see where is this going. So this is Subtitle F, State and Local Contracts and Management Fund. Just pay attention to this. A lot of the times, this was an amendment, but a lot of the times this is, there will be links in the bill to the statutes, so you don't even have to go Googling and looking for them. But just pay attention to where this code, where the changes are going in the statute. So this one, in this case, this was an amendment to make sure that this bill would not be construed to restrict a municipality or county from prohibiting abortion. So this is a bad abortion bill last legislative session. Another bad abortion bill here, House Bill 896, Section 3, Subchapter B of Chapter 402. You can see 402, this 19 and 22, the chapters, like it sounds really dense, and it sounds super complicated. But once you just kind of Google, or in this case, click on those links, they'll take you right to the chapter. And it's a lot of the time once you concentrate and read through it, it's not that complicated. Like you can see, you can click here in this instance on 19. The blue means it's a hyperlink, so you'll click it. And that's criminal homicide. So this bill is trying to make abortion homicide, right? That's how we know that. This was from last session too, but probably will be filed again this session. So just pay attention. The moral of the story is pay attention to the government codes and click on the hyperlinks. So what are the pieces of the bill? You have the heading here, the author's name. This was filed by Representative Gina Hinojosa. This is the bill number, House Bill number 102. All bills have a number associated with it. If it's HB, if it originates in the House, 102, that number will follow it for that session through both chambers. So if it's a House bill, it'll still say House Bill 102 even when it's on the Senate side. So it's House bill versus Senate bill, just depending on where the bill originated. Was it introduced by a House member in the House first, or was it introduced by a Senate member in the Senate first? The caption, the caption here at the top, like lines 2 and 3, are basically a summary of the bill. Sometimes they're really broad, and that's where they can get you. Like you read a caption, you think it has nothing to do with discriminating against trans people, for example, which we're going to see this session. But then you read it and you're like, oh, this is bad. Or sometimes it's very obvious, but it's basically supposed to be a summary of the bill. And then you have the enacting clause in line 4, where it just tells you which body of law is enacting this bill. Okay, so you read it, you realize that you have to look at some government codes, but there's all these strikeouts and underlines. What does that mean? So All of the bills we're going to add, amend, or delete provisions. Underlined means it's new language. Strike through means it's removing language. Plain text, so basically text that has no underlines or strike through, are what's currently in the code, and there are no changes being made. So here we're looking at this bill. We're striking Railroad of Texas and renaming it Texas Energy Resources Commission, right? Everything where we look at here at line 11, commission means where there's no underlines or strike throughs, that's already there and nothing's being changed. But we can see here, this bill wants to rename the Railroad Commission to the Texas Energy Resources Commission, which makes sense. It's a bill filed by Representative Anchia this session. So that's the gist of it. Like, you know, it's important to read the plain text a lot of the time, but sometimes you can skim through and just look at to like get an idea. And if you decide, oh, this is a bill I really care about, then you want to read the whole thing. And then repealers repeal whole code sections. Sometimes you'll just see a bill that says this bill repeals this part of the code. So just keep an eye out for that, because that's where you have to go look up the code. But once you look it up, you can read it. You don't have to be a lawyer. I am not a lawyer. I work with a lot of lawyers, but I ask them a lot of questions, but I've learned to do it. Tips for reading a bill. So this is just reiterating what we've talked about. Check if a bill is adding new language or amending existing language. What is it doing? Read the definitions, because sometimes you'll look at a bill, you'll wonder, okay, this says that it's changing, this applies to X, but what does X mean, right? So it's really key to look at the definition so that you really know what it's applied to, because a lot of the times you'll have, like, they'll define keywords to the policy. Check the effective date, and when does it go into effect? Look at the sections of the code the bill is amending and click the links. Remember hyperlinks, click the hyperlinks. The fiscal note, that's, you know, I'll show you the note on that. Fiscal note is when you look at, I told you the website you could go to, and I'll show you that again, to look at everything about a bill. Well, the fiscal note is basically the estimate of how much it's going to cost if this bill passes, right? And a lot of the times, if it's a high fiscal note and it's a controversial bill, it's got the less likelihood of passing, because they have to also find a way to pay for it, and that gets really complicated. And these are some definitions. SB is Senate bill, HB is House bill. Resolutions are basically bills that have no meaning, like I recognize this renaming a highway or a road or something, right? Uncontroversial bills, or I recognize this person on this day. Joint resolutions, same thing. And then joint resolutions, amend the Constitution, so that a lot of the times those, if they pass, they have to go to a vote to the people. So let's take a look at a bill here. What did we say? I'll put the link in here for you in the chat. 896. So this is HB 896 from last legislative session. If you want to look with me here. So this is the text. That's the bill. You can see the fiscal note is here. That's what I was talking about. This bill, it'll tell you the estimate of how much it's going to cost to. So this is a negative. This bill would have a negative impact of $227 million through the biennium ending in 2021. And this was from 2019. This was a bill introduced in 2019. So it should be right here. Not all of them, as soon as they are introduced, will have a fiscal note right away. Sometimes it takes them a little while to have a fiscal note. So they won't immediately have one. If you're looking for a newly introduced bill, it might not have a fiscal note. but here's the text. Remember, you can create your own free online account on this website so you can track bills yourself. So you can create your own bill lists, create your own alerts on this website. So we're looking here. This is a bill by Representative Tinderholt out of Tarrant County, who we didn't defeat because he's awful, or we weren't successful at defeating last election cycle, but we're going to try again. House Bill 896. This is related to prohibiting abortion and protecting the rights of an unborn child. We can see here where they're striking through, how he is amending what a living human child means. Abortion enforcement. The Attorney General shall monitor the state's enforcement of chapters 19 and 22 in relation to abortion. So what is 19? And this is where we're going to click on these hyperlinks. And it goes here. So I know I flew through that because I feel like me reading it is going to be really, really boring. But I figured I would show you how to do it yourself. The most important thing to remember, I think, is underlined is new language, strike through is removing language, plain text is current code. So I see a question about a separate bill is passed to make these amendments. So the amendments are voted on separately when it gets to the full House floor. So I'll show you that in the end, like where we show where they're voting. But yeah, well, I'll put a pin in that, and I'll show you where we vote there, where they go there. So this is the website you want to use. All right. Committee hearings. So committee hearings, we know, like, are a time when the public gets to go in front of their representatives or their senators and give testimony on why they're for or against a bill, right? There's a lot that happens behind the scenes by activists, by lobbyists. I actually am technically a registered lobbyist because just by the Ethics Commission, because I just talk to legislators a lot. But my job is to help prep some of this behind the scenes work, right? And what is that behind the scenes work? So first, bills are referred to committees after what we call a first reading based on subject, right? So you can see here actions on this bill. They call it being read for the first time, right? The bill is filed, it's read for the first time, and then it's referred to a committee. So that's basically what that means. So a lot of the times, a lot of bills die after they're referred to committee, after they're read for the first time and referred to committee. A lot of them don't get committee hearings. But if they do get committee hearings, they have to have a committee hearing to move forward in the process. Testimony in committee is a critical part of any advocacy plan. But there's a lot of behind the scenes work that happens to ensure a successful committee hearing, right? You want to talk to the members of the committee. You want to develop trusted relationships with the committee members ahead of a hearing, if you can, with the committee chair. So that way that you can have a line of communication. And then ahead of a scheduled committee hearing, you want to check in with the members and their staff to make sure they have talking points, to make sure that they can use the right messaging when they're advocating before or against a bill. I mean, you think of a legislator, and that's why they have staff, because one individual person, it's actually really not feasible for them to be experts on everything. We shouldn't expect them to be. We want them to be listening to us. Of course, they're all, they're really smart and they're really aware, but our job as advocates is to help inform them as well. So behind the scenes, we want to help prep them for committee hearings. We want to work with them and their staff to give them all of the information that they need. So want to make sure they have talking points, and make sure are there any questions that we as advocates think would be valuable for members to ask of testifiers, of other members, of the author of the bill, because the author of the bill has to be there to lay out the bill. So are there any questions we want them to ask? That's all part of the prep that we do ahead of committee hearings. Do all bills receive that first reading? Yes. So all bills are read at least one time and then referred to a committee, but that's where it can stop, right? They can just be referred and not get a hearing. But technically they are all read that one time, get the first reading and referred. Okay, so bill's heard in committee. Then it has to get voted out of committee. Sometimes they don't get a vote by committee members, but if it's get put up for a vote and then it's voted on by the committee members and they vote in favor of it, it's a majority votes in favor of it, then what happens? What's next? Doesn't stop there, and our advocacy doesn't stop there. So then it goes on to the calendar for either the Senate or the House. The calendar is the procedure for the process for getting on the calendar in the House and the Senate is different, right? So on the Senate, we call it the Senate intent calendar. It's a calendar that lists the bills and resolutions that are eligible for consideration on the full floor. So, the Senate floor is where all of the Senate members meet together and they consider bills together. So the Senate intent calendar is basically the calendar. The lieutenant governor is solely in charge of what gets put on the Senate intent calendar. So you can go on that Texas legislature online, the website that I showed you. It'll also show you the calendars for the day for the House and the Senate. On the Senate side, you'll see what's on the Senate intent calendar, but the bills listed on there don't have to be heard in the order they appear on the calendar. So don't be fooled, like if you see a bill that's bad or really good on the intent calendar, it may or may not come up at all, or it may come up out of order. That's just how their rules work on the Senate. So here's where it gets a little bit complicated. Things can be put on the Senate intent calendar and be listed on the calendar. But in order for them to actually move from the Senate intent calendar to actually being heard on the floor and debated on the floor, a certain number of senators have to agree to debate it. Those rules, because Dan Patrick keeps losing seats one by one in the Senate, he keeps changing the rules so that he doesn't need Democrats' support to bring a bill up on the floor, if that makes sense. And he doesn't try to hide it. You can see this is a quote from him because he changed the rules this legislative session again. He changed them last session when we won another seat. You can see this is a quote from him from like a month ago before he voted to change those rules, where he said he was going to, right? I intend to ask the Senate to vote to change the number of votes required to bring a bill to the floor for consideration. He didn't lie. When I was elected to lieutenant governor in 2015, we changed the rule so that Democrats were no longer able to veto legislation they didn't like, and he's doing it again because he keeps losing seats. So Denise said it's a good question. So the way the rules work, so Denise's question was how is he able to do this? Basically, there are different thresholds for how many votes he needs to do different things, right? So I think it's only simple majority. So basically he only needs half plus one of the senators to vote to change the rules. So he doesn't need that many senators to vote to be able to change the rules. He has plenty of senators who would vote, like enough Republicans to vote to change those rules. Yes, it is so shady, right? It is so shady, but he can do it, and he does, because he doesn't care about unity, decorum, like, decency. So that's how he's able to do it. Okay, so that's the Senate. Let's look at the House calendar. So that's the Senate. It goes from voted out of committee to the Senate intent calendar, and it may or may not move off the Senate intent calendar onto the full floor. Dan Patrick has enough support and sole discretion on what gets heard. They don't have to go in order. That's how the Senate goes. On the House, you have a few more steps. It's a bit more democratic, because they have full committees to determine the calendar. So you have two committees, the local and consent calendar and the House calendar, right? So it goes from, let's call it the Texas House of Representatives has heard a bill in the Health and Human Services regular committee, right? It got voted out. They heard public testimony. It got voted out. Well, then it's going to move on to one of the two other House calendars committees. These are the committees that schedule the calendar for the House floor. The local and consent calendar, that's the calendar committee that lists the calendar, and the calendar committee that lists all non-controversial bills and resolutions. So, again, the resolutions that we were talking about where they're renaming highways or naming a day after somebody, or this, something like that. But then there's the regular House calendars committee. This is the regular order of business for the House. It's a powerful committee that decides the House calendar. This is another point where we can kill bills in this case, because it's going to be an uphill battle this legislative session. This is another place to delay or kill bills. Bills don't have to be voted out of the House calendars committee. They can just stay there. So sometimes they'll sit there. So they'll get voted out of committee and go to the House calendar committee, and then maybe they'll get voted on, maybe they won't. So both are committees of House members that schedules or decline to schedule bills for hearing by the full House. So we have a bill, it went to the Health and Human Services Committee, went to the House calendar committee. Maybe it sat there for a while, maybe it went really quickly. And then, so that committee, you'll see, this is the committee from the 2019 legislative session. We don't know committees yet for this session. They haven't set them. They voted on them to put it on the House calendar. So then it goes onto the House calendar, which you can find the House calendar, like which bills are eligible to be heard on the House floor. That's going to be on that website I showed you as well. There's nothing there from this session. You might be able to look at old sessions. The difference between the House and the Senate is that the bills on the House calendar do go in order of appearance. So you are going to know when the bill you care about is coming up closely or soon, right? But just because something is on the calendar for January 28th doesn't mean that they'll finish the calendar for that day. So when you go on the Texas Legislature online, you'll see the daily calendar, and you'll see something called a supplemental calendar. The supplemental calendar is all of the bills that are holdover from the day or days before. So they'll go in order, but if they don't get to all of the bills on that day's calendar, they'll go on the supplemental calendar for the next day. Let me see. So a lot of trashing Dan Patrick, which is highly encouraged. Yeah. So that's the House calendar. Okay. So you see that there's a lot here and a lot of process and a lot of ways. And at the end of legislative session, one day can make a really big difference. So sometimes, behind the scenes, we're thinking like we just need to hold this bill up for one more day because that gets us closer to the deadline for X, Y, or Z thing to happen. Because there are small deadlines for different procedures that in order for a bill to pass at the end of session, it has to get voted out, for example, has to get voted out of committee by X date. So, yes, we will talk about that in a minute. So every day counts at the end of legislative session, right? And if it doesn't meet for example, the deadline for a bill to get voted out of committee, let's say that's May 11th. I don't know what it is this year. Then it's dead for session, right? So then we don't have to worry about it anymore. So we just want to get it past that line sometimes. But sometimes we want to delay things on the floor, or we want to ask floor questions for a variety of reasons. So we'll go over those reasons really quick. So you'll see, if you watch the House of Representatives or the Senate, Senate does this too, you'll see a lot of the times members asking questions back and forth, left and right. Why do they do that? If we know that this bill is going to pass, or if we know this bill is not going to, why are they still asking these questions? Sometimes they want legitimate clarification of the bill, right? For legal reasons, for interpretation, like there are legitimate clarification on a bill that they're asking the author. Because those clarifications on a bill can be used in future legal battles. Sometimes you just want to simply debate the author of a bad bill because it's a bad freaking bill. So they need to know it. Sometimes you want friendly questions on a good bill because your friends, it's a really good bill. So you want the author to be able to continue to explain why this bill is so important. A big reason though, is that sometimes we use questions to delay, right? Members are asking the questions, but we're as advocates sometimes working behind the scenes with them on these questions. Delay. For example, there's a bad bill that you don't want heard that day on the House side. So you delay earlier days or earlier bills, right, by asking questions on them to push yours to the next day, especially if there's a key deadline, right? Your bill is on the House calendar, but you just need to push it by a day and then it's dead. So you want members to ask questions of all the bills that lead up to it so they don't get to it and then it's dead, right? So that's a reason sometimes that a bunch of questions are asked on bills. Or remember the Wendy Davis filibuster, the People's filibuster. Questions were used as a tactic to get to midnight, which would have been the end of the special session, right? So that's another tactic for questions. So on key bills, advocates will work with members to place questions. POOs, points of order. This is another way to kill a bill. So see here, a point of order is a motion calling attention to a possible breach of procedural rules in the House or Senate. So a bill that a member doesn't like, they've done some digging, they think that there's something wrong in the procedure of the bill. They want to try to kill it on a point of order. Because that can, like, if something in the procedure was not done right, it can either completely kill the bill or it can delay it so much because it has to go back and do something over again that it's dead. So, for example, remember I said that a bill can only contain one subject, right? If there's a bill that's too broad that might have more than one subject in it, another member can call a point of order and say, this bill has more than one subject in it, it's unconstitutional. So once another member calls a point of order, the speaker or lieutenant governor, with the help of the parliamentarian, get to decide if the point of order sticks. Like if it's a legitimate point of order. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. but if it is valid, it can completely kill a bill. Usually requires lawyers and serious combing through bills, right? But can be an effective way if to kill a bill. For example, the Chick-fil-A bill, the first, which was a bill that it was called the Chick-fil-A bill because of San Antonio banning Chick-fil-A from the airport. It was dumb, but it was just a reason to discriminate against LGBTQ people. The first version of the bill, HB 3172, was killed on a point of order. So you can see here, this is the order of what happened, where it says point of order overruled, and there was a point of order sustained, meaning it stuck, and then it was returned to committee and it was dead. So let's see, yes, Representative Trey Martinez Fisher is really good at points of order. This makes me wonder how hard it is for a newly elected House member, Senate member to understand everything their first session. Yeah, it is, which is why sometimes it's really important for them to actually hire staff that it isn't their first session, because it is. A lot of the times their first session is just a big learning session, right? Is that the thing that Stickland did last session that almost killed that bipartisan public ed bill? Probably. I don't remember the specific instance, but Representative Stickland did like his points of order. Yes, so that is probably true, Denise. Yes, and then the members have staff, volunteers, business centers, and advocates assisting them. They do get a lot. They do get a lot of help, but they themselves are still learning quite a bit. Okay, I think we're almost there. Okay, bear with me. We're almost done. I know it's a nerdy presentation, but I hope it's providing some insight that's more than just the usual 101 stuff you get. So amendments. We also, we had floor questions that happen sometimes, points of order, but then there's lots of amendments that can happen on a bill, right? Why are amendments presented even if we know the bill is going to pass or fail, or we know the amendment's going to pass or fail? Why are they still presented? Sometimes there are legitimate attempts to make the bill better. It might be a really awful bill, but maybe there's a chance we can just make it a little bit better so it has just a little bit less impact. Or sometimes we want to get language into a bill that makes it easier to challenge legally. So sometimes there's language that, like, there's been times where they've duped the other side into passing a bill or passing a amendment that made the bill unconstitutional, right? Or we want to explicitly say, we want to have an amendment to explicitly say what they're trying to do, like discriminate against LGBTQ people, and we want a record vote on it. Another delay tactic, right? If we can have amendments that we know are going to fail, passed on to bills, that'll just delay. And then, so our job is we work on placing some amendments sometimes, right? Or we work on language for amendments. That's like the inside job there. So voting, why do they vote so many times, right? We see, you look at this is overwhelming sometimes, like step by step, what has happened for this bill, right? So all bills are read 3 times in each chamber if they pass, right? Like I said, they can just be read that first time, assigned to a committee and die. But first reading is when a bill is referred to a committee. Second reading is the first point when the entire membership of a chamber has the opportunity to debate the bill and amend it. Third reading is the next point in the process that provides a final opportunity for the entire membership of a chamber to debate a bill and or the members to offer amendments to the bill. So it's just procedure, Robert's Rule of Order, how it works. And then after the third reading, that's the final reading in each chamber, and that's when it goes to the other chamber or to the governor. So you'll see when you look at that website I showed you, if a bill is moving through the process quite a bit, The highlighted places will be the highlighted highlights on the process are where they took a record vote. Sometimes that means that it was a record vote on an amendment. So for example, this is a lot of record votes, right? But the S means that it was a record vote on the Senate side. The H means it was a record vote on the House side. But you'll see some amendments offered there. And sometimes they're record votes on amendments, not necessarily the full bill itself. So you just kind of have to read and comb through what the actual action was. So there's some websites. We can totally send this around. There's on that Texas legislature online, the website I showed you, there's also a link to definitions, which is helpful. And somewhere there's links that also go over how to read a bill. Come on. Okay, so that was a lot of information. And now I try to answer questions as we went. We have actually 15 minutes. So if you want to come off of mute now, you can. You can continue to type them into the process. If we had a full-time legislature, would that make this process more or less stressful? That is a very good question. Probably both in some ways, right? It makes sense to have a full-time, I think it's more democratic to have a full-time legislature for sure. One, because when you have a full-time legislature, and I'm going to stop share. When you have a full-time legislature, then usually they're paid like a living wage. The state of Texas also does not pay a living wage, and they only meet 6 months every 2 years. So if you are not independently wealthy, it is really hard to be a state representative or a state senator. So there's that. Not to mention that because they only meet 6 months every 2 years, the process moves really, really quickly. So we don't have a lot of time to recruit testimony, to work on, to advocate in ways that a full-time legislature would. Same time, the Texas legislature is really hard. They do a lot of bad things, and it kind of gives them less time to pass bad things. So. Could you explain what an amendment to get a bad vote on record would look like? So, for example, there was a bill, and I don't remember the bill number, but there was a bill last year on religious exemptions. So religious exemption bill is a bill that allows people to discriminate based on a sincerely held religious belief, right? Saying that this one said that if you have a license from anything, from the state of Texas, from being a hairdresser to a social worker, if the state licenses you in some form or fashion, you are allowed to discriminate based on a sincerely held religious belief. They didn't say we want to be able to discriminate against LGBTQ people, but you read between the lines, and that's what they mean. So there was a senator or two that introduced an amendment that said, okay, well then let's carve out that you're still not that you can discriminate except for on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. And of course, it got voted down because we knew that their intentions were to discriminate against LGBTQ people, but we wanted to say it out loud so that we could prove that's what they were trying to do. And they couldn't say, oh no, we're not trying to discriminate against LGBTQ people. But we know they were. So that's just an example. How do we get rid of the Senate? No freaking kidding. We need to get rid of Dan Patrick is what we need to do. And he is up for re-election in 2022. What are some, if any, examples of a more democratic state legislature in the US for comparison's sake? That is a good question that I don't think I'm equipped to answer because I'm not an expert in state legislatures across the country, but that's a really good project to look into to see like what could we be doing better. So I don't want to try to answer that without having all the information. Okay. Any other questions? I hope you absorbed some of this. I know this was a lot and it was probably really dense, but the goal was to give you a little more insight than your regular 101. So I hope you now know like what really happens behind the scenes. This is, what when some, and sometimes, this is good to know because there might be other points of advocacy that we need to act on during legislative session, right? Like outside of just committee hearings, right? We want to put calls into calendars committee, to reach out to calendars committee members to tell them not to vote to put a bill on the calendar, for example, or to put a bill on the calendar. Or same with the Senate, for example, right? Like there are other points of advocacy besides committee hearing, even though committee hearing is still really important and COVID's going to make it even harder. So this is hopefully some good insight. All right, I will turn it back over to you, Ray, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you, Carissa, for giving that presentation to us. I know it's really helpful to get a more deep dive and learn how to read bills. Oh, we got a question. What are things we can do to help pass or fail bills?
So, and right now, one, they're still filing bills. So you want to, if there's a good bill, we want to reach out to legislators and tell them this is a good bill. We should get it heard in committee. We want a committee hearing. It's hard right now because we don't know who the committees are, or on the House side. And we don't know, so therefore we don't know who the committee chairs are, and the committee chairs are the ones that schedule hearings. But once we know who the committees are and bills start being referred to those committees, we'll want to reach out to the authors of the bill and the committee chairs to tell them to schedule or not schedule a hearing for this bill, for example, right? And that's like the first step. And if you stay plugged in with Texas Rising, we will, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for you to plug in, including like adopting specific bills, right? So stay tuned as we have more meetings on how to plug in and what's like specifically what issues and what bills are happening are at the Lege. How is advocacy going to change during COVID? So there are, it is going to be hard. We're going to have to rely and come up with really creative solutions because they are not allowing virtual testimony across the board to the general public. They're allowing in-person testimony, but that's not safe. There are already at least a couple of members that have COVID, and they were from them just being in session for 3 days. So we don't want to put anybody in danger. But there's going to be allowing written testimony on the House side, redistricting on the Senate. That's the only committee, it's the only way you can testify virtually across the board is redistricting on the Senate. So stay plugged in for that. And then submitting written testimony on the House side and, digital advocacy, calls, texts, Twitter. I think those are the ways that, we're going to need to get creative on how to engage because unfortunately they're not allowing unlimited virtual testimony.
Yeah, and we'll be coming up with some things that we can do together to try and put pressure on the Lege for proactive or bad bills. So we'll be thinking about that as we go along. Also, if you connect with your regional field coordinator and you have an idea that you want to try out, you can always talk to them about what that might be. So we're always open to new ideas about ways that we can be kind of innovative while we're doing all of this work digitally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This training was to set the foundation, so you kind of have an idea of what in the last training, have an idea of where you can plug in and where the key points in the process are to really engage.
Yeah. So I see some folks are hopping off. So I guess, if there aren't any questions, we'll go ahead and close this out. Don't hesitate to reach out to your regional field coordinator or to us if you have any questions about what's happening. We will also continue to have these meetings, so there will be a place that you can go and get updates on exactly what's happening. I'm sure your chapters will be meeting locally too. So thank you all for attending the Civics, y'all. The next Civics, y'all, is going to be on February 11th, same day, same time. So Thursday at 4 p.m. on February 11th is the next Civics, y'all. We'll be talking about what Texas Rising vision is for the legislative session. So that'll be a good one to tune into. If you have signed up for this one, you should be signed up for all of the other civic sales that will occur, and we'll make sure to get a calendar event going for the rest of the civic sales that will be happening along the line. And thank you, Denise. That's very nice. And thank you to everybody also who's saying thank you in the chat. Okay, well, yeah. Thank you all for hopping on. Super nice to share the space with you all, and we hope you have a good afternoon. Bye.